Picture this. You wake up in the Stone Age. No iPhone alarm, no coffee, no cozy blanket. Just the sound of wind howling through a cave and a low growl coming from the bushes nearby. That's the caveman version of a morning alarm, a saber-toothed tiger waiting for breakfast. Today, you might hit snooze and roll over. Back then, snooze meant you became the breakfast. Life for a caveman was basically a never-ending reality show where elimination meant getting eaten. Think, survival of the fittest. But most cavemen weren't exactly six-pack warriors. They were more like skinny from skipping too many meals. They survived, not with brute strength, but with absurd creativity, dumb luck, and a lot of panicked improvisation. The morning routine was simple. Step outside and risk death, or stay inside and starve. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves was a mystery game. Is that just the wind, or is it a bear the size of a truck sniffing me out? And you thought losing your slippers in the morning was stressful. Cavemen had to find a club fast because that was the only thing standing between them and extinction. Imagine waking up to see a wolf staring right at your cave entrance. Not the fluffy husky from Instagram, but the prehistoric nightmare edition, fangs out, eyes locked, and patience running thin. That was the daily psychological exam. Either think fast or become a snack. Here's the funny part. Fear turned cavemen into innovators. No survival masterclass, no online tutorials. Every sunrise was a free but lethal. One guy screamed at a predator until it ran. Another tripped face first into thorn bushes. But even the fails became survival hacks to pass on. And the plot twist. The more terrified they were, the more creative they got. One caveman panicked so hard he threw the wrong rock axe, endly hitting a branch that spooked a whole pack of predators. Another dropped last night's leftover meat while running, only to find the beast happily munching it instead of him. Voila! The drop and run strategy was born. Basically, the Stone Age version of tossing your burger at a mugger. So the opening lesson is clear. Cavemen didn't survive by flexing muscles, but by turning fear into accidental brilliance. Wild beasts were the strictest teachers, and the first class of the day was always to stay alive. Laugh at the fear and make chaos your strategy. Now that you've survived the morning panic attack, let's talk about the caveman's first line of defense. Sticks, stones, and screaming. Yes, screaming. Forget polished weapons or sophisticated martial arts. Surly humans had the combat toolkit of a 5-year-old on a sugar rush. A stick to wave, a rock to throw, and a scream that could make a banshee jealous. Picture a caveman holding a stick like it's Excalibur. In reality, it's just a half-rotten branch that might break on the first swing. But in his mind, it's a legendary weapon forged by the gods. He waves it around, chest puffed, yelling nonsense syllables to look terrifying. To us, it sounds like oogaboo. To a saber-tooth, maybe it sounds like, this guy's crazy, better back off. That bluff alone probably saved more lives than actual fighting ever did. Then there were the rocks. Rocks were the Stone Age version of multi-purpose tools. Need a hammer? Rock. Need a pillow? Rock. Need to fight off a lion? Yep, rock. Cavemen quickly learned that not all rocks were equal. The big heavy ones, great for looking intimidating, but useless if you can't lift them. The smaller, sharper ones, perfect for chucking at a predator's head, unless you miss, in which case you've just angered a very large animal. And then we have the screaming. Scientists today call it acoustic intimidation. Cavemen probably just called it AAAH, HHHHH. The idea was simple. Make the scariest noise possible to convince predators you were tougher than you looked. Some cavemen developed signature screams, the kind that echoed through valleys like prehistoric sirens. It wasn't just about volume, it was about performing. Shake your arms, bulge your eyes, maybe spit a little. The goal was to look one bad hair day away from total insanity. Predators don't like unpredictable prey, and cavemen knew it. Of course, this strategy wasn't foolproof. Imagine a caveman screaming his lungs out at a giant bear, only for the bear to yawn, scratch its back, and keep walking closer. That's the Stone Age equivalent of sending a threatening email and getting a polite, noted reply. Sometimes the stick snapped. Sometimes the rock bounced harmlessly off thick hide. And sometimes the scream just made the predator tilt its head like, really, bro? But even failure had its uses. It bought precious seconds to run like hell. The best part, cavemen turned these weapons into theater. A lone stick was nothing, but 10 cavemen waving sticks in unison. That looked like an army. A single scream might be ignored, but a chorus of caveman voices booming through the night could trick predators into thinking there was a whole tribe of lunatics waiting. It was primitive psychological warfare. Fake it till you make it, or at least until the predator gets bored. So next time you feel embarrassed about shouting when you see a spider, remember you're channeling a survival tactic as old as humanity itself. Cavemen survived countless nights with nothing more than a branch, a rock, and a scream that said, "Back off. Buddy, I'm way crazier than you think." If sticks, stones, and screams were caveman slapstick, then fire was their blockbuster hit. Fire wasn't just for cooking. Mammoth steaks, it was the original alarm system. The prehistoric version of a security camera and burglar alarm rolled into one. Except, instead of a polite beep, it roared, crackled, and threatened to turn any curious predator into barbecue. Imagine the first time a caveman figured this out. He drops a spark on some dry grass. Suddenly, the night lights up, and every pair of glowing predator eyes in the dark takes 2 cautious steps back. That was the moment humanity became a little less snack-worthy. Fire whispered, "Come closer, and you'll regret it," for a saber-toothed cat. It was like walking into a nightclub with a strict, no carnivores allowed policy. Fire wasn't. Just heat and light tight was theater. Cavemen sat around flames, waving burning sticks like glow sticks at a rave. Creating a circle of chaos predators wanted nothing to do with. Picture a caveman holding a flaming branch and charging at a giant beast. Did the branch do much damage? Not really, but it turned him into a screaming human torch. And even lions knew better than to wrestle with fireworks on legs. Of course, fire came with its blooper reel. One wrong move and suddenly the weapon turned on its owner. Some cavemen tried to sleep too close and ended up sick. Others thought tossing flaming sticks into the bushes would make predators flee only to burn down their own campsite. Fire was powerful, yes, but it was also the Stone Age equivalent of giving a toddler a chainsaw. Incredibly effective when it worked. Hilariously dangerous when it did single quotes T.yet. Despite the risks, fire changed the entire predator-prey dynamic. Before fire, cavemen were basically walking lunch. After fire, they became slightly less convenient lunchboxes wrapped in bright, fiery warning labels. Predators still circled, but they circled warily, like teenagers eyeing a security guard at a mall. And the psychological effect was massive. Cavemen who once cowered in the dark now laughed around the flames, telling stories, drumming rocks, maybe roasting the occasional squirrel on a stick. Fear turned into confidence, and confidence was contagious. Even when predators lingered at the edges, the tribe sat tall, bathed in flickering orange light, believing in the magic of their crackling protector. The funny twist, fire didn't just scare beasts, it scared cavemen themselves. The first time flames leaped high, some thought it was an angry spirit trying to bite them. There were probably arguments like, "No, don't feed it, you'll make it angry." Fire was both pet and monster. A roommate that demanded attention but kept the wolves at bay. In the end, fire was less about brute force and more about vibes. It projected danger, mystery, and sheer audacity. It told the animal kingdom, "Yes, I'm still small, fragile, and tasty, but now I'm spicy." Here's the thing about cavemen. Alone, they were basically walking appetizers. But put a bunch of them together. Suddenly, they were a buffet with teeth. Teamwork wasn't just a nice idea, it was survival 101. Strength in numbers wasn't a motivational poster, it was the only reason entire tribes didn't get eaten before lunch. Picture a lone caveman facing down a saber-toothed tiger. He's holding a stick, shaking so hard it looks like he's conducting an invisible orchestra. The cat is licking its lips, thinking, "Easy meal." But now add 9 more cavemen, all waving sticks and yelling like drunken soccer fans. Suddenly, the tiger hesitates. 1 caveman is a snack. 10 cave. That looks like a problem. Predators don't like problems. They like dinner. Teamwork meant strategies, too. Some cavemen learned to form circles, pointing sharp sticks outward like a prehistoric porcupine. Others took turns making noise, so the predator felt surrounded. Imagine a chorus of Ooga Booga, echoing through the night, bouncing off canyon walls. To us, it sounds like chaos. To a predator, it sounds like, "Okay, that's a lot of crazy. I don't need today." But teamwork also had its bloopers. You know how group projects always have that guy who doesn't do his part? Caveman groups had one too. The tribe is standing tall, bristling with sticks, when one guy sneezes, drops his club, and runs. That's all it takes for the whole formation to collapse like domino. Suddenly, half the group is screaming, the other half is chasing the runaway, and the tiger is sitting there wondering if it should attack or just enjoy the free entertainment. Still, when it worked, it was genius. Take the divide and distract technique. One group would wave fire and yell to draw the predator's attention, while another group sneaked around to throw rocks from behind. Basically, the earliest version of good cop, bad cop, except both cops smelled terrible and had fleas. Another trick, human ladders. Not for climbing, but for looking bigger. 3 cavemen stacking on each other's shoulders, waving branches like antlers, trying to convince a bear that they were some terrifying mega creature. Did it always work? Absolutely not. Sometimes the bottom guy buckled, and they all toppled like a circus act gone wrong. But when it worked, predators backed off, clearly thinking, nope, I don't mess with whatever that is. And let's not forget the tribe chant. Rhythmic stomping, synchronized yelling, and the beating of rocks together created a prehistoric soundtrack of intimidation. It wasn't music hit, it was psychological warfare. The predators weren't sure if they were hearing a war party or just a really bad band audition. Either way, they usually decided dinner could wait. The beauty of teamwork was that it gave cavemen confidence. Alone, they trembled. Together they strutted, even if deep down every single one of them was terrified. As long as they screamed in unison, it felt like courage. And courage, real or faked, was often enough to tip the scales. So, if you think teamwork just means group projects in school, think again. For cavemen, it was the thin, noisy, slightly ridiculous line between being predator-proof and being prehistoric takeout. Now we enter the era of caveman engineering, a generous word for what was basically trial, error, and a lot of painful accidents. Traps and tricks were the cavemen's attempt at outsmarting predators. The prehistoric version of Home Alone, except with fewer bricks and way more screaming. Imagine a caveman looking at a pit in the ground and thinking, if beast falls here, beast, no, eat me. So he and his buddies dig like mad, cover the hole with branches and leaves, and wait. Hours later, they hear a crash. Victory. Except, it's not a lion. It's their neighbor, Grok, who forgot where the trap was and is now yelling from the bottom. Cue tribe laughter mixed with, well, at least it works. Pit traps were popular, but they weren't the only trick in the book. Cavemen experimented with swinging logs, spiked branches, even giant rocks balanced on ledges. In theory, these were genius. In practice, they were disasters waiting to happen. One tribe tried rolling boulders down a hill at predators, only to miscalculate and flatten their own campfire. Another proudly set up a tripwire made of vines only, to have a rabbit trigger it. Somewhere, a pack of wolves was probably watching, thinking, this is better than theater. The comedy of traps was that cavemen often ended up being their own test subjects. You know how modern engineers run simulations? Cavemen had Grok. If Grok survived, trap, good. If Grok limped back with a bruised skull, trap need adjustment. And yet, even with all the mishaps, these primitive booby traps actually worked often enough to stick around. What made them effective wasn't just the mechanics, it was the psychology. A predator steps on a branch, hears a snap, sees a log swing by its face, and suddenly thinks, nope, not worth it. Animals don't like uncertainty, and traps turn cavemen from prey into unpredictable lunatics. Imagine being a tiger expecting an easy snack and instead getting hit by a falling rock. That's not dinner, that's trauma. Of course, caveman didn't stop at traps. They invented decoys, too. A pile of animal skins arranged to look like a sleeping caveman could lure predators into attacking the wrong target. Sometimes, they even tied bones to vines, so when a predator yanked at them, it made noise to alert the tribe. Basically, they created the first prehistoric burglar alarms. The brilliance and ridiculousness of these inventions was that failure didn't stop them. A trap could collapse, backfire, or injure the builder, and the cavemen would still try again, because every success story spread like wildfire. Remember when that leopard fell in Grok's hole? Best day ever. The retellings were worth the risk, and so the cycle continued. In the end, caveman traps were less about engineering perfection and more about survival comedy. They weren't elegant, they weren't reliable, but they added just enough chaos to keep predators guessing. And in the Stone Age, keeping the enemy guessing was often the difference between being lunch and laughing about it around the fire later. If traps were caveman gadgets, then disguises, dances, and sheer dumb luck were their improv comedy routines. When the stick broke, the fire fizzled, and the traps snapped on their own foot, cavemen turned to the last resort. Let's get weird enough that even a hungry predator says, nope. Take disguises, for example. Cavemen discovered that if they smeared mud all over their bodies, they not only smelled less like fresh meat, but also looked like swamp monsters. Some went further, wearing animal hides to blend in. The problem: Blending in sometimes meant attracting the wrong kind of attention. Imagine Grok proudly strutting around in a bear skin, only to get tackled by another caveman who thought a bear had snuck into camp. Oops. Then there was the dancing. Not graceful ballet, but frantic stomping, waving arms, and guttural chants designed to confuse predators. Picture 3 cavemen circling a lion, hopping side to side, like they're inventing a prehistoric version of The lion blinks, tilts its head, and for a split second, hesitates. That split second was everything. Confusion equals survival. Plus, cavemen discovered that group dances actually scared animals more than lone warriors. So yes, somewhere deep in our DNA, the origins of the flash mob come from people trying not to be eaten. And sometimes. Survival wasn't about skill at all, it was pure dumb luck. One caveman might slip on a rock, land in a bush, and accidentally camouflage himself so well that a tiger walks right past. Another drops his bone club in panic, only for it to clang loudly and startle the predator into retreating. These were the moments when the tribe would look at each other and whisper, maybe Grok's an idiot, but maybe he's a genius idiot. Of course, dumb luck could swing the other way too. Cavemen who thought disguises made them invisible sometimes discovered too late that they were still very visible. A badly timed dance might impress the tribe, but do nothing to stop a charging beast. But even failure had value. It gave the tribe stories, and stories became lessons. Don't wear a deerskin during wolf season was the kind of advice that stuck around. What's fascinating is how these bizarre tactics worked, because they broke the rules of nature. Predators relied on patterns: chase, corner, kill. Cavemen disrupted those patterns with chaos. A human acting like prey was easy to catch. A human acting like a lunatic, that was unpredictable. And unpredictability scared even the fiercest hunters. So whether it was smearing mud, inventing interpretive dance, or tripping into accidental safety, cavemen proved that survival wasn't always about being the strongest or smartest. Sometimes it was about being just weird enough that nature itself backed off. In short, if you've ever embarrassed yourself in public and thought, that was dumb, remember, you might just be keeping the tradition alive. Cavemen survived not because they were flawless, but because they leaned into their flaws, danced with them, and occasionally turned dumb luck into life-saving brilliance. Here's where the caveman story flips. From constant prey to something far more dangerous: humans learning to think like predators. For generations, cavemen were basically walking snack packs, sprinting from one toothy nightmare to another. But over time, something clicked. They stopped just asking, how do I not get eaten? And started asking, what if I eat them first? It began with observation. Cavemen noticed lions stalked silently, wolves hunted in packs, and even tiny snakes could paralyze with one quick strike. Instead of trembling, they studied, and in the most ironic twist of evolution, cavemen turned their fear into a how-to guide. They didn't invent strategies out of thin air. They stole them from the very beasts trying to kill them. Soon, humans weren't just waving sticks and screaming nonsense. They were moving quietly through tall grass, setting ambushes, and circling their prey the same way wolves circled them. The hunted had learned the hunter's playbook. Imagine a tiger creeping toward camp, only to realize halfway that a group of humans had been creeping toward it. Talk about a plot twist, it's like the food suddenly pulling out a knife and saying, "Your move, buddy." This shift was less about muscles and more about mindset. The caveman realized that survival didn't mean running faster. It meant thinking sharper. And once they embraced that, predators started losing their monopoly on terror. The same fire that once kept beasts away was now used to drive them into traps. The same teamwork that scared lions off was now used to bring down mammoths. Slowly, the balance tipped. But don't get me wrong, it wasn't clean or glamorous. For every clever ambush, there were still plenty of slapstick disasters. Someone would jump out too early, trip over their own club, and ruin the hunt. Another might misjudge a bison's speed and end up launched into a tree. The learning curve was brutal, bloody, and hilarious in hindsight. Yet every failed attempt carved the lesson deeper. Act like prey, and you die. Think like a predator, and you live. And that mindset didn't just protect them from animals that shaped humanity itself. Tribes that embraced strategy thrived. Tribes that didn't, well, let's just say they became part of the food chain. The ability to flip fear into tactics, to laugh in the face of chaos, and to turn every misstep into a new hack. That's what transformed cavemen from lunch to legend. In the end, the caveman's greatest hack wasn't the stick, the fire, the traps, or the disguises. It was the audacity to believe they could out-crazy the wild. They weren't the biggest, fastest, or strongest, But they were the only creatures bold enough to say, fine, if you can't beat the beasts, become one. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how a bunch of hairy, half-starved humans rewrote the rules of survival by realizing that the scariest predator in the Stone Age wasn't the lion, the bear, or the saber. It was the caveman, with a plan, a torch, and a grin that said, "Who's hungry now?"